Hi guys, it's a bit more of an informal video today, but I just wanted to start by saying thank you so much for getting me over 1,000 subscribers here on YouTube. It really means the world to me that people like my videos and care enough to stick around, and I've been really touched and overwhelmed, but in a good way, by the comments and messages that I've received so far. It's such a privilege to have a growing platform and an amplified voice to talk about issues related to autism and neurodiversity, so I hope I will do right by the community with that one. It's funny, I've spent so much of my life either saying very little or being afraid to speak or having people literally talk over me, so it's like really refreshing and a really nice feeling that people actually want to listen to what I have to say. While my next goal is obviously to get to 10,000 subscribers, I have loads of things planned for the upcoming months. More video ideas, definitely more executive functioning video ideas, maybe some collabs and other things like that. So please stick around and make yourself comfortable because I am not going anywhere. Sorry about that. Today I thought I'd do a little Q&A because it's a slightly easier video for me to manage, and I am currently getting ready for a summer camp that I run every year in the UK. So I have a lot to do this week. It's going to be a very busy few weeks. So I just thought I'd give myself a little break and try and avoid my own burnout rather than sort of pushing myself to produce a certain kind and quality of video every week. But I wanted to stay consistent, and especially because I've had so many new subscribers recently, I just wanted to say hello and engage with you lovely people. Not gonna lie, I will probably do more Q&As in the future, but I won't do them every week, I promise. So whenever I do a Q&A, I will be asking the questions on my Instagram stories. So if you want to go over to Instagram and follow me, my name is @YoSamdySam on Instagram as well. So check that one out if you want to ask me any questions in the future, or you can always comment down below and I'll keep them for next time. All right, let's get some tea first because drinking tea is very trendy on YouTube all of a sudden. Okay, so first question is, how long did it take to get your diagnosis, and did you do it privately or not? So I first suspected that I was autistic a few months after I had my child. I watched a YouTube video that was sort of randomly selected by the algorithm, and it kept on trying to get me to watch this video about autism in girls, and eventually I caved in because when you have a 4-month-old child, you watch a lot of telly and you watch a lot of YouTube. So I watched it and I was a bit like, So after that point I did a lot of self-reflection, reading, research, and it took me about 7 or 8 months before I decided that I was going to get a diagnosis, or I was going to pursue a diagnosis and go to my GP. We were doing loads and loads of stuff. We were moving house and we got married in the meantime, so I was just like, I can't deal with everything. So after our wedding I said, okay, I'm going to the GP now. And I was sort of half expecting to be brushed off a little bit, but she was quite good. I went with a few traits or symptoms. I didn't take the, 6-page document that I'd been keeping, which was extremely detailed, but I took a few basic points around the sort of, what they call it, a triad of impairment or whatever, but around communication, social, repetitive habits, that sort of thing, because I wanted to give them the framework that they needed to, to send me for the referral. So I was expecting to be brushed off, but she was really good. I do remember saying something about feeling overwhelmed in IKEA, and she really latched onto that piece of info. After that point, it took about 4 months from seeing the GP. I then saw they have psychologists who work at the GP's practices here in the Netherlands. And then it was 4 months until I went for my first diagnostic session. The diagnosis itself, I had 3 sessions that were 2 hours each, and yes, that was exhausting. It was a combination of questionnaires, interviews. Some questionnaires were in Dutch as well as in English, so it was a very comprehensive assessment. Did I go privately? No, I didn't. The Dutch healthcare system is sort of semi-private. So everything was covered by my insurance, which was fantastic. I do suspect that I got quite lucky with the wait time itself. I think it might have just been like the right time of year that I'd went, and it just happened to be a spot. So I don't think everybody in the Netherlands is seen that quickly, certainly not if you're a kid. I think the school system drags it out a little bit more. But I was very lucky. So I was I got my diagnosis this January 2019, which is when I started doing these videos. So the whole time, it was about a year and a half from, am I autistic, to yes I am. So this next one, were your parents involved in your diagnosis? Yes, they were. Well, my mum was, at least. As part of the assessment, I was given a form for my mum to fill out. It could have been, she said it could have been done by anyone who knew me very well when I was young, but my mum was pretty much the best person for that. Of course, it's like 30 years ago, so there's a limit to how much you remember when there weren't really any, I don't know, there weren't enough red flags at the time for her to take me to anyone, so it's not really something that you kind of keep mulling over, is it? You're weird, shy child. So my mum's version of the questionnaire was quite different from my version of it, the same questions, which was interesting, but I think she corroborated my story enough. Certainly some of the things that she said matched with a lot of what I said, but the psychologist didn't seem concerned that a lot of it my mum couldn't remember. I think she was quite a reasonable diagnostician. Is that a word, diagnostician? I think it is, yeah. A specialist psychologist who does diagnosis. So, what's up next? Do you ever find yourself stimming, and in what situations? I actually do stim a lot, surprisingly. Before I was diagnosed, it would be very subtle, and it was one of those things that, like, I never almost said aloud to myself, but I always knew was there. I think I did stim more as a child than I do now, but I'm kind of trying to let it all out a little bit now. My more harmful ones are skin picking, which I do when I'm under a lot of stress. It's not looking very good at the moment. I mean, like, I'm bleeding here, so I would rather not do that one. So I'm kind of thinking, okay, well, if I do need to do this, what can I do? What can I get myself to redirect? I always play with my hair. That's not really a harmful one. It's just perhaps a little bit annoying to other people, but who cares? Unless my hair is up, because if I need to concentrate on getting something done, I will usually put my hair up, which, come to think about it, it's now strange. I do think that I would really benefit from, like, chew necklaces, jewelry they call it, and that's actually another video that I do want to do, and I think also fidget toys would be great for both me and my husband. So I am going to be investigating that this autumn, I think, when my life has calmed down a little bit from the summer. I also tend to go through cycles of chewing my nails. A couple of years ago I managed to stop, and like I was very, I'm gonna paint my nails and stuff, and then you have a kid and you don't have time to paint your nails, and then it sort of all goes to bleep. I don't want to bleep it in with my edit at the moment. I've got too much to do to edit it. What else have I put on? I'm a really big visual stimmer, so I really like the twinkly lights and glittery things and things like that. I don't actually have much of that stuff at home at the moment, but when it gets to autumn, winter, I am big into candles. Now I'm into kind of like the fake candles because my husband obviously watched that fire safety report a few too many times when he was younger. You know, the one where it starts with a tea light and then it ends with the entire house ablaze. So we're kind of switching to the fake candles, which is fine because they still give off a nice glowy light. But yeah, as soon as it gets a little bit dark, I need fairy lights, and I need candle light and that sort of thing. With regard to stimming, I do sometimes stim as a concentration method, but I also stim a lot more when I'm anxious. The stims when I'm anxious, it's very much more like pick, 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 pick. And the stims when I'm happy is like more of the hair pulling and stuff like that. So I do also, on occasion, flap my hands when I get excited. So if I jump up and down and flap my hands like a small child, that's a stim. I'm a grown-up, really. I just have purple hair. Right, next question. Have you ever had any friends or family not believe you or say, well, you've been fine up until now? The people I told before my diagnosis actually did take me seriously. I told a couple of my close friends and my family, and I think everyone was sort of surprised. Until they found out more about autism in women, and then they were like, oh, okay, I can see that. Have they not believed me? No. Friends and family typically do believe me, but I have had a bit of like, oh, well, it's mild. It's very mild autism. You must be very mildly autistic. And this whole idea of mild versus severe autism, it annoys me because, first of all, Every time I tell someone, that's what I get. And it's like, I'm not telling you for you to tell me how mild it is. Like, I'll tell you what I struggle with. I'll tell you what my problems are. And it's like, if you're saying I'm autistic, so I need this, to have someone say, well, you can't be very autistic because I have a cousin who has a sister who, you know, has a child who's really, really autistic. And it's just like, okay, well, we're not talking about them, are we? We're talking about me right now. And that happens a lot, you know, it's derailment, basically. It also is to think that autism is more severe or more mild based on how weird and outgoingly autistic you are is kind of a fallacy anyway. Autism is by definition something going on internally, and you can't really tell to what extent it's affecting someone by what they do on the outside. That's not like there's more autism inside, so it has to come out somehow. It's just a different representation of it. So I've got some other videos on that. They're all going to be linked in the description box below if you want to check those ones out too. I've lost my questions. Here we go. How do you deal with people that don't believe your diagnosis? Well, I haven't had anyone flat out reject it to my face, at least. But I would probably just ask them, like, you know, a little bit sarcastically, what knowledge they have that would discount the 6 hours of interviews and questionnaires and all that done by a licensed and trained and experienced psychologist. Them saying, like, you're not autistic, I know what autistic people, it's just like, well, yeah, but are you a trained psychologist? Have you actually studied this any more than just, like, watched the movie Rain Man or seen one documentary about it? Like, shut up, basically. This is what happens when I go off script. I am still kind of curious to know whether people around me, like, you know, people on Facebook and things like that, like my old friends, I wonder whether they were surprised or whether they noticed it, whether anyone saw it before I saw it in myself. People don't really notice very much though, typically, so I am guessing probably not. I think it probably came as a surprise to most people, but on the whole, people have been alright about it. Right, next question. What is your job and how has your diagnosis affected this? What else could you see yourself doing? I own a business with my husband. It's sort of IT consultancy and software. He contracts out and I do the admin side of running a business, which, living in the Netherlands, there is quite a lot of bureaucracy. Before that, I ran a gluten-free blog, which I enjoyed, but really didn't make me very much money because, I mean, this was before the food blog market was saturated, but I was not very good at photography, and like the first bite is with the eye. I'm not blaming that on why it didn't work. I think there was a variety of reasons, and also I did a lot about cake and stuff like that, and now that I am on keto, I don't really eat cake, or I have one cake recipe that's great and I just use that again and again. So before that though, in my 20s, my early to mid 20s, I had a series of unsuccessful attempts to fit into a corporate environment, which I think would make maybe an entertaining topic for another time. And that was back when, you know, I had blonde hair and I was trying so hard to fit in and conform. But it just never seemed to work, whether that's in interviews or in the temp jobs that I had. It just never seemed right. The problem is, I am the sort of person that sees a problem and will immediately try to solve the problem, including implementing new systems and strategies, and I'm like, I want to make this all good. But corporate life is kind of about stepping back and like just taking it easy and like, this is how we've always done things, and I hate that. The problem is, I think that's really stupid. I think we should be constantly trying to improve things. And if somebody says, oh, like, don't worry about it, I just think, well, that's stupid. And when I was younger, I used to think, well, you're stupid. But I've mellowed in my 30s. But working in temp jobs like that, or attempting to interview for jobs, just made me so anxious. And especially in my 20s, it took me quite a few years. I had a head injury, which was kind of a freak accident. You can ask me what that freak accident was in the comments below if you like. So I had like kind of PTSD symptoms for a while, which now I understand why. Now I understand why I reacted so strongly to that situation. Autism. But the problem was that my anxiety was so high and I just couldn't present myself in the way that I felt that they wanted me to. I I got so resentful because I knew that I was more than capable of doing the job, but I couldn't get them to see that I was capable. I couldn't make myself into the person. I didn't know what they wanted me to do to prove to them that I could do this ridiculously easy job that I was qualified for, because they wrote the job spec, didn't they? And I ticked all those off. But obviously that's kind of like a naive view of the job market. And to be honest, I can't really see myself fitting into any corporate thing unless I am an outside consultant that has been hired or something like that. I would very much rather work for myself. I hate people telling me what to do, especially when I feel like they don't know what they're doing either. So even though I may have seemed very sort of meek and mild, I used to get really agitated and annoyed at people in the workplace. And it wasn't them, it was just the corporate environment, I think. So what else could I see myself doing? Working for myself, basically, or working with my husband. Also, my workflow is very much based on peaks of energy, and God, in the morning I can work for 5 hours solid, and I can get like 3 days work done in one morning. So there are some jobs that really lend themselves well to this sort of hyper focus, and then there are some jobs where you really have to pace yourself, otherwise you will run out of stuff to do. So I hope that answered that question. I also kind of think there's no real winning for autistic people in the workplace at the moment. Interviews are not really friendly to autistic people. You know, these mandatory phone interviews when you're in the next room from someone, that's a nightmare to me. And the fact that I even managed to talk to people on the phone at all, I managed to get through these interviews, is, I think, something that I should be proud of. So, right, how do you think an early diagnosis would have changed your development? Now, this is a really, really interesting one, and I think is probably relevant to a lot of autistic women who are typically later diagnosed, but obviously, I know I go on about autistic women a lot, I am one, but anyone who's diagnosed later, by definition, made it through their childhood with nothing but internal wounds or something. And, you know, looking back, even if the diagnostic criteria were what they are now, you know, with the DSM-5 and all that, I don't think I would have necessarily been diagnosed. I think I could only have been diagnosed with hindsight. I mean, my mum sent me over one of my very first school reports when I started school at 4, and it said, like, Samantha is very popular and gets on well with others. And I mean, that sounds fake, doesn't it? But clearly I did okay at navigating the social world of 4-year-olds. You know, children are not that complicated, really. And it was only when I got to my teenage years that I started to struggle, because social stuff got a lot more complicated, I think, for me. And my primary school was also very focused on like conformity and being a good little girl, a good little Christian kind of thing. And so a quiet student, despite the fact that I was a raging atheist even back then, so a quiet little girl who did well academically, that's their dream student. So there were never any, I never got into trouble. I was terrified of getting in trouble. Looking back, I would have loved more opportunities to kind of break out of my shell. I think I would have flourished a little bit more, probably a lot more, in a very kind of like liberal hippie environment, you know, where everybody is encouraged to self-express and write songs and things like that. I don't know, write songs. But the problem was that I was so shy that even if those opportunities had been available to me, I would have needed someone to really like see something in me and then say, you should do this, like you should do debate. But underneath this whole kind of like shy thing, I was very stubborn and very annoyed by injustice in the world. So if there was a rule at school that I thought was unfair, I would get very annoyed about that. And that's usually the times I got into trouble, was because I was getting angry at these things. The problem is, though, when you don't say much, you're just sort of shy and quiet and you're terrified of getting into trouble, people sort of project this goody two-shoes image onto you. And I wasn't really interested in sucking up to teachers. I was just terrified. I was terrified of everything. And being quiet and doing what you're told in a school environment which has got rules and is very kind of like structured, that's a shield. That was my shield. And I was always a bit like quirky and different and stuff, and I did kind of let that out as I got like towards my later teens, but I think a diagnosis would have helped me just be a little bit more okay with being me a little bit earlier, rather than internalizing all of this, like, why am I different? What's wrong with me? Why can't I do this? I would have had those answers. And so I would be coming from a point of, I am different, so do I need to really pretend to do this? And I probably would have still pretended to fit in, but I would have known who I was. But honestly, I think the biggest difference that it might have done to my development would be to perhaps provide a buffer against the depression and anxiety that kind of bubbled up throughout my teenage years and came to a head in my late teens and early 20s. And I developed these, I think, because of the years of struggling through and not knowing why. So having a diagnosis earlier, even as a young teen, might have helped. I think autistic people are just prone to anxiety and depression. That comes as a result of, I don't know necessarily it's a brain thing. I think just living in a society that doesn't value you and your differences makes you extremely depressed, because it's like the world is against you sometimes. And I think, you know, if I'd been diagnosed and I didn't have so many struggles like that, and I might have been able to ask for more accommodations, not necessarily in school. I don't really necessarily think I needed them in school, but certainly for interviews, if I could say, well, I'm autistic, can we not do this interview on the phone, please? Or something like that. It's impossible to know, of course. All we can do is speculate. And I think I would have felt less lost in my 20s. My 20s, I really was just trying to find a way anyway, and I was so focused on just getting somewhere that I got nowhere, or I feel like I got nowhere. Yeah, I hope I answered that question. It was a really good question, and I think it's interesting to speculate, but all you can do also is focus on the diagnosis you have and your life now. I don't want to redo my childhood, and definitely not my teenage years. Redoing my 20s might be nice, but here we are. If you are that way inclined towards Instagram, I will be doing a giveaway very soon to say thank you for 1,000 subscribers, but as mentioned, I am trying to manage my own burnout, so it might not be right now, but I will be doing one, I promise. So please head on to my Instagram if you're into giveaways, or if you just want to see like more random stuff and selfies and, you know, pictures of my lunch and stuff like that. If you are new to this channel and want to learn more about autism, there is a playlist right about here. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.